The gunshot echoed across the dusty streets of Sweetwater Creek, silencing every soul within earshot as Harriet Vaughn stood trembling, her palms still stinging from the slap she'd delivered to Reginald Blackstone's smug face moments before. His proposal hadn't been one of love, but of ownership, and her refusal had just signed her exile from the only home she'd ever known. Sweetwater Creek, Arizona Territory, 1885, was a town on the brink of prosperity, thanks largely to Blackstone's silver mines and the railroad he'd paid handsomely to divert through their previously forgotten corner of the desert. The wealth had transformed their sleepy settlement into a boomtown practically overnight, and with it came new rules unspoken but ironclad. Chief among them, what Reginald Blackstone wanted, Reginald Blackstone got. You ungrateful little wretch. Mrs. Holloway, the boarding house proprietress, screeched as she hurled Harriet's modest belongings onto the street. After all Mr. Blackstone has done for this town, after all he offered you. Harriet gathered her scattered possessions with as much dignity as she could muster, her honey-brown hair falling from its pins as she knelt in the dirt. The crowd that had gathered maintained a distance not out of respect, but fear. To help her now meant risking Blackstone's wrath. He offered to make me his mistress, not his wife, Harriet said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. I would rather starve than sell myself. Then starve you shall, Mrs. Holloway spat. No one in Sweetwater will hire you now, no decent house will shelter you. You've made your choice. A small valise and a wrapped bundle of books were all Harriet had to show for her 23 years of life. The daughter of the town's schoolteacher, she'd been left alone when influenza had taken her father 3 winters past. She'd maintained a respectable existence teaching the younger children and doing seamstress work, until Blackstone had noticed her at the Founders' Day celebration. His pursuit had been relentless, his gifts unwanted. When she'd refused him for the final time that morning, his offer had turned ugly, become his kept woman, or face the consequences. Harriet had chosen the consequences. Now, as the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, she stood at the edge of town with nowhere to go. The stagecoach wouldn't come through for another 3 days, and she had precisely $4.72 to her name. Miss Vaughn. The voice was deep, unfamiliar. Harriet turned to find a man atop a chestnut mare watching her with curious blue eyes. Dust coated his trail-worn clothes, and the shadow of a beard darkened his jaw. He wasn't from Sweetwater. She would have remembered him. I couldn't help but overhear your predicament, he said, tipping his hat back to reveal sun-bleached hair. Finn Ellsworth. I've got a wagon headed for Tuxen. If you're needing to put some distance between yourself and this town, I'd be happy to offer you passage. Harriet hesitated, clutching her belongings tighter. Why would you help me, Mr. Ellsworth? You don't know me. A smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Let's just say I've got no love for men who think wealth entitles them to whatever or whoever they want. He nodded toward her meager possessions. And that no you gave him, seems to me it showed more character than this whole town put together. She studied him cautiously. Everything she'd been taught warned against trusting strange men, especially in her vulnerable position. But there was something in his direct gaze that spoke of honesty. I have very little money to pay for passage, she admitted. Not asking for any, he replied. Got some cattle to deliver and could use an extra set of hands with the cooking. Nothing improper, he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. My younger sister's traveling with the outfit. You'd be doing us a favor, truly. Before Harriet could respond, the saloon doors burst open down the street and Blackstone emerged, flanked by his men. His face was still red where she'd struck him, his eyes scanning the street until they landed on her. She's coming with me, Finn said quietly, extending his hand. "What'll it be, Miss Vaughn? Stay and face whatever he's planning or take a chance on the unknown?" Harriet looked at Blackstone's approaching figure, then back at the stranger's outstretched hand. In that moment, she made her second life-altering decision of the day. "To Tuxen, then," she said, accepting his help onto the horse. As they rode toward the outskirts where his wagon train waited, Finn leaned close enough that only she could hear his words. "That no you gave him. It just might have saved you for something better." She didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. The wagon train consisted of 3 large freight wagons loaded with supplies, a chuck wagon, and a small covered wagon where Finn explained his 18-year-old sister, Faith, traveled. A dozen cowboys rode alongside, herding nearly 200 head of cattle destined for sale in Tucson. Faith Ellsworth proved to be a blessing Harriet hadn't anticipated. Small and sprightly, with the same striking blue eyes as her brother, she welcomed Harriet with genuine warmth. "Thank heavens," Faith said, embracing Harriet as though they were long-lost friends. "I've been surrounded by men who smell of cow for weeks. Another woman to talk to, I might just keep my sanity after all." The girl's easy acceptance soothed Harriet's raw nerves. As they prepared to make camp that first evening, several miles outside Sweetwater, Faith showed her the small but tidy living space she'd created in the wagon. "You'll share with me, of course," Faith said, arranging a bedroll. "Finn sleeps under the stars with the men, says he can't abide the confines of canvas walls. Your brother seems very—" Harriet searched for the right word. "Stubborn, bossy, overprotective," Faith supplied with a laugh. "Kind," Harriet finished. "I'm still not entirely sure why he helped me." Faith's expression grew serious. "Finn's got a strong sense of justice. Our pa was the same way before he passed. They butted heads something fierce, but they were cut from the same cloth." She arranged a small oil lamp on a crate that served as a table. "And between you and me, I think he's sweet on you already." "Don't be ridiculous," Harriet said, heat rising to her cheeks. "He doesn't even know me." "He knows enough," Faith replied with a knowing smile. "He knows you stood up to a powerful man when it would have been easier not to. That says plenty about a person's character." As the days passed, the wagon train made steady progress toward Tuxen. Harriet found her place in the rhythm of trail life, helping Cookie prepare meals and learning to bake bread in a Dutch oven over the campfire. The work was hard but honest, and for the first time in months she slept without worry. She learned that Finn had inherited the ranch from their father 2 years prior. Based near Tuxen, the Double E was modest by some standards but growing steadily under his management. This cattle drive represented their first major sale to the Army, which would secure the ranch's future if successful. On the 4th evening, as they made camp alongside a shallow creek, Harriet found herself alone with Finn for the first time since leaving Sweetwater. She'd been washing dishes when he approached, carrying his plate. "Cookie says you've got a talent for biscuits," he said, setting his empty plate beside her wash basin. "Best he's had on the trail." "High praise, considering he told me this morning my coffee could strip paint," Harriet replied, smiling despite herself. Finn laughed, the sound warm in the cooling desert air. "Cookie's particular about his coffee, don't take it personally." He stayed to help her dry the dishes, and Harriet found herself studying him when he wasn't looking. The setting sun caught in his hair, turning it the color of wheat fields. His hands were calloused from work, but gentle with the delicate tin cups. "Can I ask you something, Mr. Ellsworth?" she ventured. "After you've fed me for 4 days, I think Finn would be appropriate," he replied. "Finn, then," she said, testing the name. "What would you have done if I'd refused your help in Sweetwater?" He considered her question, taking his time before answering. I'd have respected your decision, but I'd have stayed in town long enough to make sure that man didn't harm you." His eyes met hers, serious now. "I don't make a habit of rescuing women, Miss Vaughn. But there was something about the way you stood your ground all alone, but unbending, that made me think you deserved better than what that town was giving you." "Harriet," she said softly. "If I'm to call you Finn, then I'm Harriet to you." "Harriet," he repeated, and something in the way he said her name made her heart flutter strangely. A comfortable silence fell between them as they finished the dishes. In the distance, someone began playing a harmonica, its mournful tune floating across the camp. "What will you do in Tuxen?" Finn asked finally. The question had been weighing on her. "Find work, I suppose. I'm a fair teacher and a decent seamstress. I'll manage." He nodded, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. The double E could use a school teacher. "We've got hands with families, children growing up wild as the land. They deserve an education." Harriet stared at him, uncertain if he was offering charity or genuine employment. "I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition," he interrupted. "It's a job offer. Room, board, and fair wages. You'd have your own cabin, small but private. Think about it. You've got time before we reach Tuxen." Before she could respond, one of the cowboys called for Finn's attention, something about a lame horse needing tending. With a tip of his hat, he left her with her thoughts and the ghostly melody of the harmonica. That night, lying beside Faith in the wagon, Harriet stared at the canvas ceiling and considered his offer. A new start, away from Blackstone's influence, doing work she loved. It seemed too perfect, too convenient. "You're thinking too hard," Faith mumbled sleepily beside her. "I can practically hear your brain grinding." "Your brother offered me a teaching position at your ranch," Harriet whispered. Faith propped herself up on one elbow. "Did he now?" "And what did you say?" "Nothing yet. I'm not sure if it's proper to accept," Faith snorted. "Proper? Harriet, you're in the middle of nowhere traveling with a bunch of cowboys. I think we've left proper a ways back." She settled back down. "Besides, the children really do need a teacher. The last one left to marry some miner 6 months ago." Harriet lay awake long after Faith's breathing had deepened into sleep. The desert night was alive with sounds: coyotes in the distance, the soft lowing of cattle, men's voices as they changed watch. It was all so different from the stifling respectability of Sweetwater. Maybe different was exactly what she needed. The journey continued, and with each passing day, Harriet found herself growing more comfortable with trail life. She learned to recognize poisonous plants, to spot water sources from a distance, and to predict the weather by watching the sky. The cowboys, initially standoffish, warmed to her after she mended their torn shirts without complaint and remembered how each man took his coffee. And then there was Finn. He kept a respectful distance, never making her uncomfortable, but she often caught him watching her with those thoughtful blue eyes. They shared conversations during quiet moments about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they harbored. He spoke of expanding the ranch, of breeding stronger cattle that could withstand the harsh Arizona climate. She told him of her father's passion for education, how he'd believed every child deserved knowledge regardless of circumstance. They were a week into their journey when trouble found them. It began with dust on the horizon, spotted by one of the cowboys during the midday break. Finn ordered the wagon circled and the cattle brought in tight. Harriet and Faith were ushered into the center of the formation, along with Cookie and the supplies. "Raiders?" Harriet asked as Finn checked his rifle. "Maybe. Could be nothing," he replied, but his tense expression belied his casual words. "Stay with Faith. If anything happens, you both get under the chuck wagon and stay there until I come for you." 7 riders approached, their horses lathered from hard riding. Harriet's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the lead rider, Howard Mercer, Blackstone's foreman. "Ellsworth," Mercer called, stopping his horse at the edge of their makeshift fortress. "We've got no quarrel with you or your outfit. Just hand over the schoolteacher and we'll be on our way." Finn stepped forward, rifle held casually but ready. "The lady's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Turn around and ride back to your boss." Mercer's face darkened. "Mr. Blackstone doesn't take kindly to having his property stolen." "I am not his property," Harriet shouted, stepping forward despite Faith's attempt to hold her back. "I refused him honestly and openly. You embarrassed him in front of the whole town," Mercer spat. "He's offering you one last chance to reconsider his generous offer before he takes more persuasive measures." Finn moved to stand between Harriet and the riders. "I count 7 of you. We've got 15 guns here, all pointed at your chest. Those seem like poor odds for persuasive measures." The standoff stretched, tension thick as summer heat. Harriet held her breath, knowing Blackstone's men were not known for backing down. Finally, Mercer hawked and spat on the ground. "This isn't over. Mr. Blackstone gets what he wants, always has, always will." He jerked his horse around. "We'll be seeing you in Tuxen." They watched until the riders disappeared over the horizon. Only then did Finn lower his rifle, his knuckles white around the barrel. "They'll be back," one of the cowboys muttered, "with more men." "Then we'll be ready," Finn replied, his voice hard. He turned to Harriet, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "I'm sorry to have brought this trouble to you." "You've brought nothing but help to this outfit," he said firmly. "Blackstone's the one bringing trouble." He addressed the assembled men. "Double the night watch. We push harder tomorrow, make for the mountain pass. It'll be easier to defend if they come back." That night, as they camped in the shadow of rocky foothills, Harriet couldn't sleep. The confrontation had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The idea that Blackstone would send men after her, that he considered her rejection a personal affront rather than her right, filled her with both fear and fury. Unable to rest, she slipped from the wagon, careful not to wake Faith. The night was cool, stars blanketing the sky in dazzling profusion. She wrapped her shawl tighter and walked toward the dying campfire. She found Finn already there, staring into the embers, a cup of coffee in his hands. "You should be resting," he said without looking up. "So should you," she countered, sitting beside him on a log. He offered her his cup, and she took a sip, the bitter liquid warming her throat. "I keep thinking about what Mercer said," she admitted. "About Blackstone always getting what he wants." "Men like that," Finn said quietly, "they believe the world owes them everything they desire. When someone says no, it challenges not just what they want but who they think they are." "And who is Reginald Blackstone?" Harriet asked, "a man who's never heard no enough times." Finn reclaimed his cup, his fingers brushing hers. "My father used to say you can judge a man's character not by how he treats his equals, but by how he treats those he believes are beneath him. And what would your father think of you now, protecting a schoolteacher you barely know from a powerful enemy?" A smile ghosted across Finn's face. "He'd say I was being pig-headed and reckless." The smile deepened. "And then he'd do exactly the same thing." Harriet felt warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. "I've decided to accept your offer," she said, "to teach at the Double E if it still stands." Finn's eyes met hers, surprise and pleasure evident in their depths. "It stands. The children will be thrilled, and not just because they've been using the absence of a teacher to avoid their studies." They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Harriet found herself aware of him in a way that both excited and frightened her, the breadth of his shoulders, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, the way his presence made her feel secure despite the dangers they faced. "We should both get some sleep," he said finally, standing and offering her his hand. "Tomorrow we'll come early." She allowed him to help her up, her hand lingering in his a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Finn, not just for the job, but for everything." "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his voice low. "We've still got to get past Blackstone's men and safely to Tuxen." "We will," she said with newfound confidence. "Together." The next few days passed without incident, though the entire company remained vigilant. They pushed harder, making good time through the mountain pass and down into the valley that would eventually lead them to Tuxen. Harriet continued her duties, but she noticed Finn keeping her closer, making sure she was never alone or unprotected. On the 10th day of their journey, disaster struck. They'd been traveling alongside a river, the water a blessed relief after days of carefully rationed supplies. The cattle were contentedly grazing on the lush riverside grass during the midday break when the first shot rang out. Finn, who'd been consulting with his trail boss, immediately shouted for everyone to take cover. Harriet and Faith dove beneath the nearest wagon as more shots followed, sending splinters flying from the wooden sides. "It's an ambush," someone yelled. The cattle, spooked by the gunfire, began to scatter, threatening to stampede through the chaos. Harriet glimpsed men on horseback emerging from the tree line across the river. At least a dozen, maybe more. Blackstone had made good on his threat, sending reinforcements to retrieve her. The cowboys returned fire, creating a defensive perimeter around the wagons. Finn appeared beside the wagon where Harriet and Faith huddled, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "Stay down," he ordered, pressing a small revolver into Harriet's hands. "Use this only if you have to." The metal was cold and heavy in her grasp. "Finn, I'm not letting them take you," he said fiercely. His eyes held hers for a heartbeat, communicating something deeper than words could express. Then he was gone, moving to organize the defense. The gunfight raged for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes. Harriet held Faith close, the younger girl trembling but bravely silent. Through the gap beneath the wagon, Harriet watched boots rushing back and forth, heard orders being shouted, and prayed no one would be killed because of her. A scream cut through the chaos. One of their cowboys had been hit. The firing intensified, and then Harriet heard a sound that made her blood run cold, the thundering of hooves approaching fast. Blackstone's men were charging across the river. "Get ready to move," she told Faith, gripping the revolver tighter. "If they break through, we run for the trees on our side." Faith nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'm not letting them take you either." The attackers reached the camp, and the fighting turned close and desperate. Harriet could hear grunts, curses, the dull thud of fists meeting flesh. She peered out from under the wagon and saw Finn engaged in a brutal struggle with Howard Mercer. Both men bloodied but unbowed. Mercer landed a vicious blow that sent Finn staggering backward. As the foreman reached for his gun, Harriet made a split-second decision. She scrambled from beneath the wagon and swung a cast-iron skillet abandoned by Cookie in the chaos with all her might. The pan connected with Mercer's head with a resounding clang. He dropped like a stone, unconscious before he hit the ground. Finn stared at her in shock, then at Mercer's crumpled form. "Remind me never to cross you at breakfast," he managed, wiping blood from his split lip. The tide of the battle had turned. Several of Blackstone's men were down, others retreating back across the river. The remaining attackers, seeing their leader unconscious and their advantage lost, began to fall back. One man, more desperate or loyal than the rest, made a final charge toward Harriet. Finn stepped between them, his gun raised. "It's over," Finn said coldly. "Go back to Blackstone. Tell him the lady's answer remains no, and if he sends anyone else after her, they won't be riding back at all." The man glared, clearly weighing his options before backing away slowly. "This ain't over," he growled, echoing Mercer's earlier threat. "Yes," Finn replied, "it is." As the last of Blackstone's men retreated, the cowboys tended to their wounded. Miraculously, no one had been killed, though 2 men had serious injuries that would require a doctor's attention. They bound Mercer and the other captured men, planning to deliver them to the sheriff in Tuxen as proof of Blackstone's illegal actions. Faith emerged from hiding and immediately set to work helping the injured, tearing strips from her petticoat for bandages. Harriet joined her, grateful for the distraction from the trembling that had overtaken her body now that the danger had passed. When the immediate needs were addressed, Finn found her kneeling beside the river, washing blood not her own from her hands. Without a word, he sat beside her, offering a flask. "Whiskey," he explained when she hesitated, "for medicinal purposes." She took a small sip, the liquid burning a fiery path down her throat. "I hit a man with a skillet," she said, somewhat dazed by her own actions. "You saved my life," Finn corrected. "Mercer would have shot me if you hadn't intervened." "I've never been violent before," she admitted. "My father believed strongly in turning the other cheek." "Sometimes," Finn said gently, "protecting those you care about requires more than turning the other cheek." He touched her hand lightly. "I'm grateful you chose action over philosophy." She looked up at him, really looked, and saw the depth of feeling in his eyes. In that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of emotions neither had been ready to name until now. "I couldn't bear to see you hurt," she whispered. His hand covered hers, warm and steadying. "Nor I you. When I saw Mercer and his men, all I could think was that I'd only just found you. I wasn't ready to lose you." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile and profound. Before either could say more, Cookie called out that food was ready for those who could eat. "We should join the others," Finn said, though he made no move to leave. "We should," Harriet agreed, equally still. Finally, with visible reluctance, he stood and offered his hand. As he helped her up, he didn't release her immediately. "Harriet," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips. "When we reach Tuxen, when this is all over, I'd like to properly court you, if you're amenable." Joy bloomed in her chest, bright and unexpected. "I'd like that very much." His smile was like sunrise breaking across the horizon. With her hand still in his, they walked back to camp, toward the future that awaited them beyond the trials they'd yet to face. The remainder of the journey passed with heightened vigilance but no further attacks. Mercer and his captured men were kept under guard, their presence a grim reminder of the threat that still loomed over them. Yet despite the tension, Harriet found herself experiencing moments of unexpected happiness. Faith, having witnessed Harriet's brave defense of her brother, had elevated her to heroic status. The cowboys, too, treated her with newfound respect, no longer seeing her as just a refined schoolteacher, but as a woman of courage and resourcefulness. And Finn's eyes followed her with undisguised admiration that made her heart race whenever their gazes met. As the landscape gradually transformed from rugged wilderness to the outskirts of civilization, Harriet felt herself changing too. The woman who had left Sweetwater frightened, alone, with an uncertain future was not the same woman approaching Tuxen. This new Harriet had discovered her own strength, had fought for her freedom, and had perhaps found something she'd never expected: love. They arrived in Tuxen on a bustling Wednesday afternoon, the streets crowded with traders, soldiers from the nearby fort, and townspeople going about their business. Their first stop was the sheriff's office, where Finn delivered Mercer and his men, along with a detailed account of Blackstone's persecution. Sheriff Daniel Thornton, a grizzled veteran with shrewd eyes, listened carefully to their story. "Blackstone's got influence, even this far south," he warned them. "But kidnapping and assault are serious charges. I'll wire the territorial marshal, see what can be done." He eyed Harriet thoughtfully. "You might consider making a formal statement, Miss Vaughn. Your testimony would strengthen the case considerably." "I'll do whatever is necessary," Harriet replied firmly. "Reginald Blackstone needs to understand that his money doesn't place him above the law." "Brave words," the sheriff said with approval. "I'll arrange for a judge to take your statement tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you all find somewhere to rest. You look like you've had a rough journey." They secured rooms at the Grand Hotel, the first proper beds they'd have since leaving Sweetwater. While Finn went to oversee the delivery of the cattle to the army buyers, Harriet and Faith indulged in the luxury of hot baths and clean clothes. "You look like a new woman," Faith declared as Harriet emerged from behind the dressing screen in a freshly pressed blue dress, one of the few nice garments she'd managed to save from Mrs. Holloway's unceremonious eviction. "I feel like one," Harriet admitted, pinning up her damp hair. "It's strange. I should be terrified of what Blackstone might still do, but instead I feel free." Faith smiled knowingly. "Having my brother besotted with you probably doesn't hurt." Harriet blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to anyone with eyes," Faith teased. "He looks at you the way Pa used to look at Ma, like you're the sunrise after the longest night." The comparison made Harriet's heart flutter. "He's asked to court me properly once this business with Blackstone is settled." Faith clapped her hands in delight. "I knew it." "Oh, Harriet, nothing would make me happier than having you as a sister." She sobered slightly. "You do care for him, don't you?" "More than I thought possible in such a short time," Harriet confessed. "It's as though I've known him much longer than a few weeks." "Some connections don't need time," Faith said with unexpected wisdom. "They just need the right souls finding each other." That evening, Finn escorted them to dinner in the hotel's dining room. Freshly shaved and dressed in his best clothes, he cut a striking figure that drew appreciative glances from several female diners. But his attention never wavered from Harriet, his expression warming whenever their eyes met. The meal was the finest Harriet had enjoyed in years: roast beef, fresh vegetables, and apple pie with real cream. The conversation flowed easily, with Faith regaling them with stories of the ranch and the colorful characters who worked there. "Mr. Hodges, he's our foreman, has been with the Double E since before I was born," Faith explained. "He's got the gruffest exterior you'll ever see, but he carves little wooden animals for all the ranch children at Christmas. And Mrs. Alvarez runs the kitchen like a general commanding troops," Finn added, "but her tamales are worth any amount of her scolding." Harriet smiled, imagining the community they described. "It sounds wonderful." "It's home," Finn said simply. "Not grand, but good." After dinner, Faith claimed exhaustion and retired early, though her exaggerated wink at Harriet suggested her fatigue might be strategically timed. Finn offered Harriet his arm for a turn around the hotel garden, which was lit with paper lanterns in the gathering dusk. "The cattle sale went well," he told her as they strolled beneath flowering trellises. "Better than expected, actually. The army was impressed with the quality of the herd." "That's wonderful news," Harriet said. "Your father would be proud." "I hope so." His voice held a trace of wistfulness. "He worked so hard to build something that would last. Some days I worry I'm not doing enough to honor that legacy." "From what I've seen, you're doing exactly what he would have wanted," Harriet assured him. "You care for your sister, your ranch, your men. You even rescue school teachers in distress." That earned her a smile. "Just the one school teacher," he corrected. "And I'm beginning to think she rescued me just as much." They paused beside a small fountain, the gentle splash of water creating a pocket of privacy in the garden. Finn turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Harriet," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I know we haven't known each other long, and I promise to court you properly once we're home. But these past weeks facing danger together, seeing your courage, your kindness, they've shown me what kind of woman you are, and I find myself—" He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. "Yes," she prompted, hardly daring to breathe. "I find myself falling in love with you," he admitted. "Deeper and faster than I ever thought possible, and while I don't expect you to feel the same yet, I wanted you to know the truth of my heart." Joy surged through Harriet, bright and overwhelming. "Finn," she whispered, squeezing his hands, "how can you think I don't feel the same? You came into my life when I was at my lowest point and showed me kindness without condition. You've protected me, respected me, seen me as I truly am. How could I not love you for that?" The wonder that bloomed on his face was worth every hardship she'd endured. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, he leaned closer. When their lips met, it was gentle, a question rather than a demand. Harriet answered by sliding her hands to his shoulders, drawing him nearer. The kiss deepened, becoming a conversation of feeling too profound for words. When they finally parted, both were breathless, and Finn rested his forehead against hers. "I promised myself I'd be patient," he murmured, "that I'd give you time to be sure." "I am sure," she replied. "Life is too uncertain, too precious to waste on unnecessary waiting. We've both seen how quickly everything can change." He smiled, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Still, I intend to court you properly. You deserve no less." A discreet cough interrupted them. They turned to find a hotel bellboy looking embarrassed. "Begging your pardon, Mr. Ellsworth, but there's a gentleman in the lobby asking for you. Says it's urgent business regarding Miss Vaughn." Finn's expression hardened. "Did he give a name?" "Yes, sir. Said his name is Blackstone." "Reginald Blackstone." Harriet's blood ran cold. "He's here?" "In Tuxen." "Stay in your room with Faith," Finn instructed, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Lock the door, I'll handle this." "No," Harriet said firmly, gripping his arm. "I won't hide while you face him. This is my fight, too." They stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Finn nodded. "Together, then. But stay close to me." The lobby of the Grand Hotel was elegant, with polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Standing beneath the largest of these, looking perfectly at ease in an expensive suit, was Reginald Blackstone. Beside him stood a thin man clutching a leather portfolio, his lawyer, Harriet presumed. Blackstone's eyes fixed on her as they approached, his thin lips curving in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Vaughn," he said smoothly, "how delightful to see you well after your impulsive departure from Sweetwater." "Mr. Blackstone," she replied coldly. "I'm surprised you came all this way, considering I made my feelings perfectly clear." "Did you?" He raised an eyebrow. "All I recall is a momentary misunderstanding, followed by an unfortunate series of events." "Events," he added, his gaze shifting to Finn. "That included the assault and kidnapping of several of my employees." Finn stepped forward. "Your men ambushed our wagon train and attempted to abduct Miss Vaughn against her will. They're currently enjoying the hospitality of the Tuxen jail, where they'll remain until the territorial marshal arrives." Blackstone waved a dismissive hand. "A regrettable overzealousness on their part. I merely asked them to ensure Miss Vaughn's safe return to Sweetwater, where she belongs." "I belong wherever I choose to be," Harriet said, finding strength in Finn's solid presence beside her. "And I've chosen to accept a teaching position at the Double E Ranch." "How quaint." Blackstone's smile thinned further. "But I'm afraid there's a small legal matter to address first." He nodded to his lawyer, who opened the portfolio and extracted a document. "Miss Vaughn borrowed a considerable sum from me last year to cover her father's medical expenses and funeral costs. The loan has come due and with interest amounts to $500. Harriet gasped. "That's a lie. My father's bills were paid in full before he died. I never borrowed a penny from you." "I have documentation that says otherwise," Blackstone countered, as his lawyer presented the paper with a flourish. "Your signature, I believe." Harriet examined the document, her heart sinking. The signature did resemble hers, though she knew with absolute certainty she'd never signed such a paper. "This is a forgery," she said, looking up to meet Blackstone's smug gaze. "You're stooping to fraud now." "Serious accusations, Miss Vaughn," he replied, unperturbed, "but easily settled. Pay the debt and we'll consider the matter closed. Otherwise—" He shrugged. "Debtor's prison is most unpleasant, I'm told." Finn took the document, studying it carefully. "This won't stand up in court, Blackstone. A decent judge will see through this charade in minutes." "Perhaps," Blackstone conceded. "But how long will that take? Weeks? Months? All while Miss Vaughn's reputation is dragged through the mud in a public trial." His cold eyes fixed on Harriet. "Is that what you want? To be known throughout the territory as a woman of questionable virtue who refuses to honor her debts?" Before either Harriet or Finn could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. "Actually, Mr. Blackstone, I believe it's your reputation that won't survive scrutiny." They turned to see Sheriff Thornton approaching, accompanied by a distinguished older man in a fine suit. "Judge Harmon," the sheriff said, "may I present Miss Harriet Vaughn and Mr. Finn Ellsworth, and I believe you're already acquainted with Mr. Blackstone." The judge nodded gravely. "Indeed, we had business in Phoenix last year." He turned to Blackstone, whose confident demeanor had faltered slightly. "Mr. Blackstone, I find it curious that you'd present this loan document today, when I distinctly recall dismissing an identical claim against the late Mr. Vaughn's estate 18 months ago. The signature was deemed questionable then as well." Blackstone's lawyer paled visibly, edging away from his client. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I've just received sworn statements from your foreman, Mr. Mercer, detailing your instructions to, and I quote, bring the Vaughn woman back by any means necessary." "Conspiracy to commit kidnapping is a serious offense, Mr. Blackstone." "Mercer is lying to save his own skin," Blackstone snapped, his composure cracking. "And this is a private matter between Miss Vaughn and myself." "Not anymore," Sheriff Thornton said, producing a pair of handcuffs. "Reginald Blackstone, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, fraud, and filing false legal claims." For a moment, it seemed Blackstone might resist. His eyes darted around the lobby, perhaps seeking escape or assistance. Finding neither, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "This isn't over," he hissed as the sheriff cuffed him. "I have friends in high places." "So do we," Finn replied calmly. "The difference is our friends believe in justice." As the sheriff led Blackstone away, Judge Harmon turned to Harriet. "Miss Vaughn, I apologize for the distress this man has caused you. Rest assured, he'll face the full consequences of his actions." "Thank you, Your Honor," Harriet said, still processing the sudden turn of events. "How did you know to be here?" The judge smiled. "Sheriff Thornton wired me as soon as Mercer and his men were brought in. I remembered your father's case immediately. He was a good man, highly respected. When I heard his daughter was being persecuted, I came straight away." After the judge departed, Harriet and Finn stood alone in the lobby, the reality of what had just transpired slowly sinking in. "It's over," Harriet whispered. "Really over." Finn took her hands in his. "You're free," he said softly, "free to choose your own path without fear." She looked up at him, seeing all she'd ever wanted reflected in his eyes. "I've already chosen," she said. "I choose you, Finn Ellsworth. I choose the double E and teaching and building a life where saying no to the wrong things lets me say yes to all the right ones." His smile was brighter than all the chandeliers combined. "That's good," he said, drawing her closer. "Because I'm counting on a lifetime of yes from you, Harriet Vaughn." And there, in the grand lobby of Tuxen's finest hotel, he kissed her again, a promise of all that was to come. 3 days later, they departed Tuxen for the Double E Ranch. With Blackstone awaiting trial and his threat neutralized, Harriet felt truly at peace for the first time in months. The wagon rolled through picturesque countryside, Faith chattering excitedly about introducing Harriet to everyone at the ranch. "Mrs. Alvarez will adore you once she tastes your biscuits," Faith predicted. "And the children, oh, they'll be so thrilled to have lessons again." Finn rode alongside the wagon, occasionally reaching through the canvas opening to squeeze Harriet's hand or share a private smile. They had agreed to a proper courtship of 6 months before discussing marriage, though both knew their minds were already made up. As the sun began to set on their first day of travel, they crested a hill and Finn pulled his horse to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing to the valley below. "The Double E." Harriet leaned out to look. Spread across the green valley was a sprawling ranch, not ostentatious like Blackstone's holdings, but solid and well-tended. A large main house stood surrounded by smaller cabins, barns, and corrals. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and even from a distance, she could see figures moving about, tending to end-of-day chores. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's home," Finn said, his eyes on her rather than the ranch. "You're home now, too, if you want it to be." "I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else," she replied honestly. They made their way down to the ranch, where their arrival caused a flurry of activity. Cowboys, ranch hands, and their families emerged to welcome them, curious about the new schoolteacher Faith had mentioned in her wire from Tuxen. Mrs. Alvarez, the formidable housekeeper Faith had described, enveloped Harriet in a warm embrace that belied her stern countenance. "Welcome, Miss Vaughn. Any friend of Faith's is family here." "Thank you," Harriet said, touched by the immediate acceptance. "I hope I can contribute to this wonderful place." "Oh, you already have," Mrs. Alvarez said with a knowing glance toward Finn. "I haven't seen the patron smile like that since before his father passed." Finn showed her to the small cabin that would be hers, recently cleaned and prepared for her arrival. It was simple but charming, with a bedroom, a sitting area with a small fireplace, and shelves waiting to be filled with books. "The schoolhouse is just behind the main barn," he explained, watching as she explored her new home. "It needs some work, but we can have it ready before you start teaching." "It's perfect," Harriet said, running her hand along the smooth wooden table. "All of it." He hesitated at the door. "I'll leave you to settle in. Dinner's at the main house in an hour if you're not too tired." "I wouldn't miss it," she assured him. True to his word, Finn conducted their courtship with proper respect and consideration. He called on her each evening after her teaching duties were complete, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers, a book he thought she'd enjoy, honey from the ranch's hives. They took rides across the vast property, picnicked by the stream that ran through the eastern pasture, and spent evenings on her porch swing, talking until the stars wheeled overhead. The children of the Double E proved eager students, especially once they discovered their new teacher made learning an adventure rather than a chore. Harriet introduced poetry competitions, science experiments, and historical reenactments that soon had even the most reluctant scholars looking forward to school days. As autumn painted the landscape in gold and crimson, news reached them that Reginald Blackstone had been convicted on all charges and sentenced to 5 years in the territorial prison. The victory felt complete when they learned that Sweetwater's citizens, emboldened by Blackstone's fall, had elected a new town council committed to more equitable governance. "Justice does prevail sometimes," Finn remarked when they received the news, "though it often needs a helping hand." "Or a well-aimed skillet," Harriet added with a smile. He laughed, then grew serious. "You know, I've been thinking about what Blackstone said that day in Sweetwater about your no being ungrateful." "Have you?" she asked, curious where his thoughts were leading. "That no of yours, it wasn't just a rejection of him, it was an affirmation of your own worth." He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "And selfishly, I'm grateful for it every day because it saved you for me. For us," she corrected softly. Their courtship progressed through the changing seasons, their love deepening with each passing day. By the time spring returned to the valley, painting the ranch with wildflowers and new growth, the entire Double E was anticipating the announcement everyone knew was coming. It happened on a perfect April evening, as they walked along the creek that gave the ranch its water. Finn had been unusually quiet all day, and Harriet had sensed something significant brewing beneath his calm exterior. He led her to a flowering dogwood tree where a blanket had been spread, a picnic basket waiting. As they ate the simple meal of bread, cheese, and fruit, Finn seemed increasingly nervous, fumbling with his napkin and starting sentences only to abandon them midway. Finally, Harriet took pity on him. "Finn Ellsworth, whatever you're trying to say, please just say it before you wear a hole in that poor napkin." He looked startled, then laughed, some of his tension easing. "Am I that obvious?" "Only to someone who loves you," she replied gently. Taking a deep breath, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had a speech prepared," he admitted, "about how you've brought light and learning and laughter to the Double E, about how I wake each morning grateful that you said no to Blackstone and yes to coming here." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "But all I really need to say is that I love you, Harriet Vaughn, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." The ring slid onto her finger as though it had always belonged there. Finn's kiss was tender, reverent, filled with promise. "I should warn you," he murmured against her lips. "Faith has been planning our wedding since the day we met." "She's likely to have opinions," Harriet laughed. "As long as you're waiting at the altar, she can plan whatever she likes." They were married on the first day of summer, beneath an arch of roses in the Double E's garden. Faith, as predicted, had orchestrated a celebration that brought together the entire ranch community and friends from miles around. Judge Harmon himself came to officiate, pronouncing them husband and wife with evident satisfaction. "I've presided over hundreds of weddings," the judge told them at the reception, "but few have given me as much pleasure as joining two people who found each other against such odds." The celebration continued long into the evening, with music and dancing under lantern light. As night fell, Finn led his bride in a waltz, their movements perfectly synchronized despite the uneven ground. "Happy, Mrs. Ellsworth?" he asked, his eyes never leaving hers. "Completely," she answered truthfully. "Though I keep expecting to wake and find this all a dream." "If it is," he said, pulling her closer, "then I'm dreaming too, and I never want to wake." Later, as they stood on the porch of the main house, now their house, watching the last revelers making their way home, Harriet leaned against her husband's strong shoulder. "I was thinking about that day in Sweetwater," she mused. "How everything seemed to be ending. I never imagined it was really just beginning." Finn wrapped his arm around her waist. "Life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes the worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be." "And sometimes," she added, turning in his embrace to face him, "saying no to the wrong thing is the only way to say yes to the right one." His kiss was tender, a promise renewed. "I'll spend a lifetime being grateful for that no," he whispered against her lips, "and for every yes that's followed." 5 years later, the Double E had prospered beyond even Finn's ambitious dreams. The ranch had expanded, adding new pastures and breeding stock that made their cattle sought after throughout the territory. The school had grown too, with Harriet now employing an assistant teacher to help with the increasing number of children. Their own family had grown as well. 3-year-old James toddled after his father everywhere, already showing signs of becoming a fine horseman. And 1-year-old Emma was the image of her mother, with the same honey-brown hair and determined spirit. On the anniversary of the day they'd met, Finn surprised Harriet with a gift, a small silver locket engraved with the words "that no saved you from me." "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that the courage to refuse what's wrong often leads to everything that's right." As they stood on their porch that evening, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over the land they loved, Harriet knew she had found her true home not in a place, but in the heart of the man beside her and the family they had created together. "I love you, Finn Ellsworth," she said simply, taking his hand in hers. His smile was as warm and genuine as the day she'd first seen it on that dusty Sweetwater street. "And I love you, Harriet Ellsworth. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." In the golden light of sunset, surrounded by the life they'd built together, Harriet silently thanked the twist of fate that had brought them together, and the courage that had allowed her to say no to the wrong future so she could say yes to the right one.